A good Wednesday morning. Michael Clark here with BAM WX. We're going to talk about the pattern, right? Everybody's wondering, is it going to get cold? Are we going to have winter? Is it going to get warm? Is winter on? Is winter off? Who knows what's going on? We're going to talk all about it right now. I'm going to give you my analysis, my prediction, my opinion based on what I'm seeing and the trends and things here for the winter up and coming. Share it with a friend, tag a friend, let some folks know here. And we're going to get right into the analysis today on what is winter going to do from a level-headed, just non-biased opinion here on the winter pattern at hand. So let's get right into this here. I'm going to minimize this, and I want to show you the departure from normal temperature here over the last couple of weeks. We've certainly seen the pattern turn much cooler, right? It's been cold. In fact, it's going to be cold for another 4 to 5 days, 3 to 4 days, let's say, as the majority of this cold, a really strong shot of cold, will reinforce here the next couple of days and move off to the east before kind of being erased. And we go into what looks like perhaps a little bit more of a milder period. Precipitation has been really lacking, if you will. It's been an overall drier pattern with the exception of the west coast, the Pacific Northwest, and up there into the north and east. Elsewhere, there's not been a lot of action here. Precip-wise, it's been a relatively pretty quiet pattern. As we look at this going forward over the next 7 days, we see a good signal for rain and storm systems here across the deep south, into the Ohio Valley, up and into the north and east. Obviously a bigger focus of heavier rains down here across the deep south, Dixie Alley down there. Dry and nothing going on in the Central Plains, dry and nothing going on out here in the desert Southwest. Wetter up into the PNW here. But again, this is just over the next 7 days, all right? Over the next 10 days, this is a bigger story, and really it's the lack of snow. Unless you're in the Great Lakes, where we have just absolutely historic lake effect snows going on across upstate New York, Michigan over there, and far northeastern Ohio, northern Pennsylvania. You can see just how much snow is occurring here over the next 10 days. But taking us out to the morning of December 14th, you're hard-pressed to find much of any snow. All right, there may be a weak clipper that comes through here and offers up a coating of snow here tonight, but it ain't going to be much. It's a pattern that is not incredibly favorable for any big snows, as the Arctic air source is really departing for the time being. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. This is temperatures over the next 7 days. So, the first 10 days of December are cold in the east. There's no question. In fact, the first day of December was one of the coldest days in December ever, by the way, which is interesting. Not that it really means anything, but it was a very cold start, no question. The pattern evolution all hinges on tropical convection and kind of the forcing at hand there, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Week 2 forecast, obviously quite a bit warmer here via the overnight European ensemble model data, and most ensemble data overnight has still continued this moderation period. This takes us out through the evening of the 18th of December with a much above normal temperature forecast for 90% of the country, with the exception of the southeast perhaps being a little bit cooler than normal. Okay, so here's day one. I've got American data across the top. I've got European data across the bottom. All right, we see what's going on. There's no reason to compare the far left charts. That's just day one. Day 10, American model. All right, I want you to pay close attention to what's going on right here. All right, you can see the blues showing up and the heights retracting. The issue is here is where that's occurring. It's causing the heights to expand, thermal expansion here in the south and east. We lost a little bit of that blocking here. This piece, this Pacific piece here, all right, what's happening is if this could have continued to go poleward and could have continued to bend stronger and go further north, it would have created the connection for the cross-polar flow and minimized this southeastern ridge nonsense that we're seeing here, the flexing of the Bermuda High out here in the Atlantic. But it's not happening. In fact, by day 10, this signal is weakening on both of the ensemble data. In fact, both of them are eerily similar. You can see just how similar they are in their forecast projections by day 10. There's really not much difference. And the day 15, there's not much difference, especially in the Pacific Ocean. when we look at the Pacific pattern in general from the American model, and we look at it in general here, general takeaways from the European model, they're pretty much the same forecast right now, which is we are eroding the North Pacific block. And that has to do with the MJO phases. And I'll tell you, what kind of led the way here with the suggestion of the MJO is the GEFS, the American model products. I'm not sure why it's showing that there. It is led the way with kind of seeing this. It was seeing it first, and it's handling the Madden-Julian oscillation, the pulse of this better. Reason for this is the European. It just doesn't do well normally with tropical convection in the maritime continent. It has biases. It just doesn't handle it as well. I think it catches on eventually and probably gets on the boat, on the train, as you're seeing here on day 15 on the right. There's no really reason to question that. It's seeing the issue here in the expansion of the heights and the warmer conditions here by day 15. All right. So this is the MJO. The MJO is tropical energy that travels across the equatorial Pacific Ocean. It starts in the Indian Ocean, or the Western Hemisphere in Africa, if you will, goes through the Indian Ocean, travels through the maritime continent, and then gets into the Pacific, into the Western Pacific, and eventually into the Eastern Pacific Ocean, right? And then where it restarts. It's just upward motion, convection that travels across the Pacific. It alters the jet streams. That's what the Madden-Julian oscillation does in a nutshell. It alters wind flow and jet streams. And here's the thing. We need to look at what the model data is doing with the MJO. And right now, all of it, essentially, is moving the MJO across the maritime. And there's multiple examples of this. The European is the one struggling the most, though. It's still trying to do it. All right, you see what it's doing. It's going through phases 4, 5, and it tries to kill it in 6, but keep it going weekly and getting into 7. Multiple ensemble members here, day 15 to 20, keep it in a 6 and 7 pulse. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology is trying to do the same thing, is trying to kind of re-emerge it and get it moving here. And then the American data, the CFSV2, multiple runs of that, taking it into a high amplitude 5, 6, and 7. Regardless, what's happening is the general takeaway is an MJO pulse looks to try and be moving across the Pacific Ocean, which impacts the entire pattern. That's the key here. Everything is impacted by this. Let's say we take a sensible approach here, all right, and we look at this from a standpoint of, here's the initial period, and that's right now, right here. We're in phase 4, and we get into phase 5. We battle some easterly winds. What that means is that the MJO wants to move from west to east across the Pacific Ocean, but it's running into easterly zonal winds that are stopping it or trying to slow it a little bit. The data is suggesting it can make it through there. There's a window of opportunity for the wave to propagate across the Pacific. As it would do so into December, it would cross into phases 5, 6, 7. As it continues to do that, there's no reason for us to believe that it would stop there. A couple of things happen as we get into 7, 8, and 1, if that were to continue. 2017 is a decent analog when this happened. It got very cold in late December of 17 into January. This could be a little bit delayed than that, a little bit further, slower than that. But phase 7, something happens here, is it's a precursor to a strong warming of the stratosphere, a sudden stratospheric warming event. It doesn't always guarantee it, but it does indicate that it can be a precursor to cold. But phase 7 also opens up the door for the blocking to return in the Pacific in phases 7 and 8, and for it to get colder. Phases 5 and 6, they are not cold. They're just not. They are warm, and they're very warm. In fact, phase 6 is very, very warm. All right, which leads us to believe that what we're looking at right now is it's very cold the first 10 days of the month. The first 8, 9 days, 10 days of the month from west to east. And then it takes a big break from probably the 10th of December through the 25th or the 30th, give or take. Especially if this MJO pulse continues to do this. I don't see a reason right now why this won't happen. I've been looking at this stuff for hours this morning. My opinion is that a very warm moderation period from the 10th to the 25th or 30th of December is in play. I do not think, however, that takes winter off the table by any means. I think that what it could do is set up shop for the MJO to get back into colder phases, some of the low-frequency background signals to return, the North Pacific blocking can come back, and I think it can really be a pattern favorable for a winter return here very early January, right? That's kind of the thought process right now, is that this pattern can come back into January, all right, early January. Some more reason I want to share with you behind this is I looked at years that really had some close comparisons that, if you look at December 2013, it had some warmth in the east, all right? It had some warmth out ahead of storm systems. You look at late 13 into early 14 of January, got very, very cold. 13-14 winter was a cold one, all right, especially in the Midwest and the Great Lakes area. I looked at the overall pattern at hand that drove that winter. I look at these starting December and ending December, I see an MJO pass, right? You see the outgoing long wave radiation, the velocity potential, the easterlies kind of gave out. I look at the forecast, right? I see an MJO pass in the CFS data as very, very similar. In fact, if you take this data beyond this into January, it's got a strong westerly wind burst suggestion here into early January, as it did here in 14. This is 2014, right? It's a similar evolution of the MJO here. And what's interesting about 13 and 14 is it's the TNH. It's the pattern that promotes this Hudson Bay vortex, this North Pacific blocking, and a little bit of a gradient in the southeastern U.S. And it promotes a lot of cold in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the interior Northeast, the East Coast. I'm a little concerned about the East Coast. Not a little, a lot probably, for cold to really seep all the way that way. But nonetheless, this is a good example of that. And I tell you, I like the CFS forecast here. I like what it's doing. I like how it's progressing things. I want to show you why. All right, because it does say, hey, you know what? The blocking here, it's going to take a break a little bit. We may have some higher latitude, higher heights for a time, but the North Pacific really loses the block. You can see the big vortex here in the Bering Sea. But one thing I want you to notice that doesn't also ever go away is the TPV, the tropospheric polar vortex over the Hudson Bay. All right, that's going to continue to probably work over the Hudson Bay, freeze it up pretty good, and we may see some cryoc feedback, some ice feedback from that, similar to the 13-14 winter, where we have a constant tap of cold in the vortex there for storm systems to come through and pull that through and bring cold air down, warm ahead, cold behind, but active into January. That's just, again, I'm predicting things. That's what I do, right? If it's wrong, great, whatever. You can say, hey, Michael, you were wrong. I'm saying, all right, cool. But interesting to note that feature really sticks around. Watch what starts to happen. Here's the 25th to the 1st, 24th of December to the 31st. Watch what starts to happen. Blocking starts to come back a little bit here in the west. The trough develops rather deeply in the east. And then the CFS gets really aggressive with the EPO. Strong EPO signal there into January. The reason being is because it's taking this into 781 of the MJO. And it is keeping this feature really dominating the lower 48, which is the tropospheric polar vortex here in the Hudson Bay. What happens is you shove this back. The low frequency background state of the atmosphere suggests that this should be a player this winter. This could be a hiccup from the MJO, but the sea surface temperature pattern, the low frequency background state suggests this should be a player. This should come back. All right? Just call it early January. This should come back, creating a cross-polar flow of Arctic air, tapping into that TPV across the Hudson Bay. And this plus TNH pattern can develop where it's very cold and very stormy here across the central U.S. That's what that does, right? So that the CFS makes a lot of sense there. In fact, I'll show you guys this. You can, I should have pulled it up. And you can just Google it, and it'll come right up. Google's so good nowadays with all this stuff. I'm sure you can track me. But I posted this the other day, and this is the plus T&H temperature pattern in January, the correlation with surface temperature departures. Again, remember I mentioned the East Coast and the Southeast, the flexing southeastern ridge, and the high can keep it warmer across the east, southeast, and the East Coast potentially. Warmer anomalies here with the blocking, but the cold is here due to the cross-polar flow in the Hudson Bay vortex being readily available. The other thing that it does is that it keeps it active in this particular area, which is why the Midwest and the Great Lakes could experience above normal snow in January. Okay, so I know I'm saying a lot right now. There's a lot going on, but a lot to talk about. Here's the CFS at the start of the forecast period. There's the warm mid-month. Starts to get cold again by Christmas and beyond, possibly. Could that be a little quick? Yes. Could the cold really arrive closer to the new year in the first week of January? Yes. Generally speaking, though, I like the CFS evolution. It makes sense to me. If I'm predicting the future, that's what I'm saying, right? The other thing I'm interested in that intrigues me is East Asia pattern right now, predominantly not very cold. Like to see more cold in East Asia. The forecast models, they change that. They change the pattern out here. You go into the 10 to 14 day and a trough develops over East Asia. That's another encouraging signal for this to return here by late December. Late December, I think this pattern can come back. All right. So here's what I want to talk about real quick. This is a blank map of clarity. Here's my thought process. Okay, and I'll make this as simple for you as I can. Just to make this easy. I think in here, this area here, you're above normally warm. All right, you're warm from the 10th to the 25th. All right, we'll just draw it like this. So you make this very simple. 25th, somewhere in the 25th to 30th, it can get colder. That would be the period to watch for the colder, stormier signal to return, or the trough in the east to return, perhaps a Great Lakes Midwest trough, not necessarily East Coast trough. Okay. Then the thought process would be that the cold can spill in. Let's say somewhere around it starts to kind of spill in, perhaps like this, between so I'll split the difference, 27th through the 10th of January, or maybe even the 5th. Let's call it the 5th of January. The cold spills in, and it probably becomes a little bit more active in the pattern. Okay? And then I think a bigger, strong Arctic air blast that will cover most of the area, but shunt the storm track pattern very much to the south. Very cold period, perhaps the 5th through the 10th beyond of January. Okay, something like that. Maybe it's the 10th to the 25th of January. I don't know right now. There's no way for me to know. But that gives you kind of a general idea of the thought process of how I'm seeing the pattern evolve. Okay, so cold now, warm to rather warm until Christmas. The Christmas to New Year period gets colder. January could be very cold and wintry. That's the call for now. Take it or leave it, right or wrong. Share it with a friend. Talk to you soon.